Okay, so you're an engineer, which means you're no stranger to emails.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of emails.
Yeah, definitely.
But we both know a poorly written one, it can really mess things up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Misunderstandings,
Sure.
delays, frustration.
Yeah, it can be a nightmare.
It's a recipe for disaster. But what if your emails were actually a superpower?
A superpower.
Like boosting your efficiency, your credibility, even your teamwork.
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
That's what we're diving into today.
Perfect.
We've got some fascinating sources all about professional emailing, specifically for engineers.
You know, it's funny. As engineers, we spend so much time honing our technical skills.
Right?
But often we don't give the same attention to our communication skills.
Right.
Especially writing.
It's true.
Yeah.
We can solve these complex equations, design these really intricate systems, but writing a clear email, sometimes that feels like a whole other challenge.
Exactly. But the thing is, in the real world, your technical brilliance, it only gets you so far if you can't communicate it effectively.
Totally.
Think about it.
Yeah.
You're constantly explaining these technical details to colleagues, managers, maybe even clients who don't have your level of expertise.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Right.
How do we make sure that our emails are clear, concise, and they get the point across without losing anyone in a sea of jargon?
The sources we have really emphasize this idea of structure.
Structure?
They argue that every email, no matter how simple or how complex, should follow a certain framework.
Okay, so framework, like a blueprint for an email.
Exactly.
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin?
It all starts with the subject line.
Okay.
Yeah, it might seem basic.
The subject line.
But you'd be surprised how many people mess this up.
I'm sure.
The key here is specificity.
Okay.
Your subject line should be like a headline, instantly telling the recipient what the email is about.
I've definitely been guilty of sending those vague subject lines.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when I'm in a rush. Yeah. Just question or following up.
Right.
Doesn't really give much information, does it?
No, not at all.
No.
And that's how important emails get lost in the inbox abyss.
Yeah, they just get buried.
Instead of a generic problem, try something like System Error Report Project X.
Okay.
Instead of quick question, try request for clarification on component specifications.
Ah, okay, I see the difference.
Right.
That's way more helpful for the recipient.
Yes.
And probably helps you stay organized too.
Absolutely. Now, once you've nailed that subject line, you move on to the greeting.
Right, the greeting.
This might seem like a small detail, but it sets the tone for your whole email.
So how do we strike that balance between being professional but not too stuffy? Is dear name always the way to go?
It depends.
Okay.
For formal communication, like when you're emailing a client or someone high up in the organization, dear name is probably the safest bet.
Okay.
But for everyday emails with colleagues you work with regularly, a simple hi name can be more appropriate.
All right, so we've got our subject line, we've got our greeting down.
Yes.
How do we actually start the email?
Okay.
What's the best way to get to the point?
Right.
Without rambling on?
The key here is to be direct.
Okay.
State your purpose clearly and concisely right at the beginning.
Right.
Don't bury the lead.
Don't bury the lead.
Instead of a long-winded intro.
Yeah.
Jump right in.
Okay.
For example.
Right.
Instead of saying, hope this email finds you well.
Right.
I was just wondering if you could.
Yeah. Very roundabout.
Try. I'm writing to request. Or following up on our conversation about.
Got it. No need to beat around the bush.
Exactly.
Just be upfront about what you need.
Yes.
Now, what about the main body of the email?
Okay.
Especially when we're dealing with like complex technical information.
Right. That's where things can get a little tricky.
Yeah.
You know, engineers, we love details and we tend to over-explain things.
We do, yeah.
But when it comes to emails, conciseness is king.
So how do we balance providing enough technical information but not overwhelming the reader?
The sources, they actually suggest a few strategies.
Okay.
The first is to break down large chunks of text into smaller, more digestible paragraphs.
Okay.
Aim for 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph, max.
So instead of one giant wall of text, we give the reader some breathing room.
Exactly.
That makes sense. What else?
Bullet points.
Bullet points.
are your best friend.
Yes.
Use them liberally.
Okay.
To list out steps, requirements, or key takeaways.
Yeah.
They make technical information much easier to scan and absorb.
Bullet points, always a lifesaver.
Always.
It's like creating a roadmap for the reader to follow.
Exactly. Yeah, and when you're explaining a complex process, consider using visuals.
Visuals.
Like diagrams or flowcharts.
Oh, visuals. That's a great point.
Right.
I sometimes forget that emails don't have to be just text. We can actually use visuals to make things clearer.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, another important point the sources highlight is tailoring your language to your audience.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
Right.
Like, don't we just use standard engineering terminology?
Not always.
Okay.
Remember, you're not always communicating with other engineers.
Sure.
You might be emailing a project manager, a client, someone from a different department who might not be familiar with all the technical jargon.
Okay, so we need to think about who we're talking to.
Yes.
And adjust our language accordingly. What's the best way to do that?
Think about it this way.
Okay.
If you were explaining a complex concept to your grandmother, would you use the same language you'd use with a colleague?
Probably not.
Right.
My grandmother would have no idea what I was talking about.
Exactly.
I'd have to like break it down into simpler terms.
Yes.
Avoid using any of that technical jargon.
And that's the same approach you should take with your emails.
Okay.
If you're emailing someone who's not technically inclined, avoid acronyms.
Right.
Use plain language.
Okay.
Maybe even include a brief explanation of key terms.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Even if they don't have the same technical background.
Precisely.
Okay.
And remember, clear communication, it's not just about being understood. It's also about building trust and credibility.
Okay.
When you can explain these complex ideas in a way that anyone can understand, it shows that you really know your stuff.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
All right, so we've covered the subject line,
the
greeting, the opening, and the main body. What's next in our email blueprint?
Well, we've talked about structuring that email, being clear and concise in the main body.
Right.
But now, how do we wrap things up effectively?
Yeah, how do we close?
A closing.
Yeah.
It's just as important as the opening.
Okay.
It's your last chance to make a good impression and ensure that the recipient knows what to do next.
So no more like a vague, let me know what you think.
Yeah, exactly.
Hope to hear from you soon.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Those types of closings, they leave the recipient wondering what action you're expecting from them.
Right.
So instead, you want to end with a clear call to action.
Okay, a call to action.
I was reading through the source material.
Yeah.
And they had some great examples. One that stood out to me was for requesting a code review.
Okay.
They wrote, please review the attached code by date and let me know if you have any questions or concerns.
Okay, that's super clear.
Right.
Specific. There's no room for ambiguity.
Another tip I find helpful is to rephrase your initial request in the closing.
Okay.
It subtly reminds the reader what you're asking for.
It's like a gentle nudge.
Yes.
Without being pushy.
Exactly.
So if I'm asking for clarification on a project requirement, I could say something like, once you've had a chance to review, please let me know the final decision on the platform we'll be using.
Exactly. It reinforces your request, makes it easier for the recipient to respond.
Makes sense.
And also, don't underestimate the power of expressing gratitude.
Okay.
A simple thanks in advance for your help or I appreciate your time goes a long way in building goodwill.
Okay, so call to action.
Yes.
Rephrasing the request.
Express gratitude.
Right.
Got it. Anything else we need to keep in mind for the closing?
Just make sure that your contact info is in your signature.
Oh.
It seems obvious.
Yeah, of course.
But you'd be surprised how many people forget to include it or have outdated information.
Right. Phone number, email address, job title.
Yes.
Maybe even like a link to your LinkedIn profile.
Exactly.
All the essentials.
You got it. All right. So
now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about something that often trips up even experienced engineers.
Okay.
Emailing non-technical audiences.
Oh, that can be a minefield.
It can be.
I once tried to explain a database schema to a marketing manager.
Oh, no.
And I think I just ended up confusing them even more.
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
One of the sources actually had this fantastic analogy.
Okay.
They said that explaining technical concepts to a non-technical audience, it's like trying to teach Shakespeare to a dog.
Okay.
You might be super passionate about it.
Right.
But the dog just wants to play fetch.
That's hilarious, but so true.
Right.
We have to remember not everyone speaks our language.
Exactly.
So how do we bridge that communication gap without dumbing things down too much?
The key is to focus on the why.
Okay.
Instead of getting bogged down in the how. So instead of overwhelming them with all the technical details, explain the problem you're solving.
Okay.
The benefits of your solution. And the impact it'll have on their work.
So, for example, instead of launching into a detailed explanation of how this new algorithm works, I should focus on how it will improve efficiency or reduce errors.
Exactly.
Okay.
Frame it.
Yeah.
In terms of their priorities and their concerns.
Okay.
Use analogies and real-world examples to make those complex concepts more relatable.
I like that. It's about finding common ground, speaking their language, even if it's not our native tongue.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now let's move on to another crucial aspect of professional emailing.
Okay.
Proofreading.
Oh, the dreaded proofreading.
I know, right?
I have to admit, I'm not always the best at catching my own typos.
Don't worry. You're not alone.
Thanks.
But in a professional setting, even small errors can damage your credibility.
Right.
It's like showing up to a presentation with a wrinkled shirt.
Okay.
It might not affect the content, but it sends a message of carelessness.
Ouch. That's a good analogy.
So how can we make sure that our emails are polished and error-free?
Well, first of all,
yes,
I know we can't just rely on spell check.
Never rely solely on spell check.
Right.
It can catch those typos, but it often misses grammatical errors or misused words.
Like there versus there. Exactly. Or effect versus effect.
Those can be tricky.
They really can.
One of the sources recommends reading your email aloud.
Reading it out loud.
It might sound silly.
Okay.
But it forces you to slow down
Yeah.
and catch errors you might miss when reading silently.
I've actually tried that before.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly helpful.
It is.
It's like you're hearing your own writing with fresh ears.
Exactly.
Okay.
Another technique is to have a colleague
Okay.
proofread your important emails.
Okay.
A fresh pair of eyes
Yeah.
can often spot mistakes we miss.
That's a good tip, especially for those high-stakes emails.
Yes.
Like proposals or client communications.
Absolutely. Now, what about the tone and style of our writing?
Okay.
Are there any specific things that engineers should pay attention to?
You know, this might seem obvious, but one mistake I see engineers making a lot is being too casual in their emails, like using slang or emojis.
Yeah, or even internet acronyms.
Right, especially when emailing colleagues they're friendly with.
Exactly.
I've definitely been guilty of that.
Yeah.
It's easy to slip into that informal mode when you're emailing someone you know well.
But it's important to remember that even in those casual settings, professionalism should always be the default.
A default,
Think of your emails as a reflection of your personal brand. You want to project an image of competence, credibility, and respect.
So no more LOLs or smiley faces in work emails.
Probably best to err on the side of caution.
All right.
You never know who might see your email or how it might be interpreted.
That's a good point. I'd hate for a casual comment to be taken out of context.
Exactly.
Or misconstrued.
Yeah. Now, the sources we've been discussing, they highlight another important element of email etiquette. Managing attachments.
Attachments.
No.
The source of so much email frustration.
Yes.
I've been on both sides of this, sending massive files that clog up inboxes.
Right.
Receiving cryptic attachments with no explanation.
Exactly. It's a common pain point.
Yeah.
So one of the first things to consider is file size.
Okay. File size.
Before you attach a large file, ask yourself, is it absolutely necessary?
Right.
Can you provide a link to the file instead?
Okay.
Or summarize the key information in the email itself.
That's a good point. Sometimes we get so focused on sending all the data that we forget to think about the recipient's experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if you do need to send a large attachment, always compress it first.
Okay.
Zip files are your friend.
Right. Zip it up.
And don't forget to give that attachment a descriptive name.
Oh, right. The file name.
Yes.
Like project update final v3 revise docs.
I know, right?
Doesn't exactly tell the recipient what's inside.
I've received so many emails with attachments simply named document 1 or file.
They're like a guessing game.
Exactly.
Instead, something clear and specific like Project X technical specifications.pdf.
Much more helpful.
Way more helpful.
And don't just attach the file.
Right.
Without any explanation. You always want to provide context in the email body.
So instead of just saying, please attached, I should say something like, I've attached the technical specifications for Project X as discussed in our meeting.
Exactly. Tell them what the attachment is, why you're sending it, and what action you're expecting from them.
It's all about being considerate of the recipient's time and making their life easier.
Now, before we wrap up this section, let's talk about a topic that can be a bit sensitive, but is essential for engineers dealing with disagreements or conflicts over email.
Conflict resolution, that can be tricky even in person.
I know, right?
Let alone in an email.
Any advice from our sources on navigating those choppy waters?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, one of the key takeaways is to always maintain a professional tone.
Okay.
Even when you disagree with someone.
Right.
So avoid using inflammatory language, personal attacks, or sarcasm.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know.
Especially when you're feeling frustrated or misunderstood.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to remember that emails, they can be easily misinterpreted.
Right.
What might seem like a harmless joke to you could come across as offensive or unprofessional to someone else.
And once you hit send, there's no taking it back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself getting heated, it's often best to take a step back and cool down before responding.
Yeah. Walk away, get a cup of coffee.
Sometimes a phone call or a face-to-face conversation is a better way to resolve conflict.
Right, because then you can kind of like hear the tone of voice. And...
Exactly. It allows for more nuance and avoids those misunderstandings that can arise from written communication.
Totally.
One of the sources had a great tip.
Okay.
They suggested using I statements.
I statements.
Instead of you statements.
Okay.
When expressing disagreement.
So instead of saying you're wrong about this, I would say I have a different perspective on this issue.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's less accusatory.
Right.
And it focuses on your own viewpoint rather than attacking the other person.
It's a subtle shift in language.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would make a big difference in how the message is received.
It's all about finding ways to communicate assertively without being aggressive.
Right? So assertive, but not aggressive.
And remember, even in conflict, it's important to find common ground and focus on solutions.
Solutions, not problems.
Rather than dwelling on the problem.
Okay, so stay calm, choose your words carefully, and always strive for a resolution that benefits everyone involved.
Exactly.
All right.
Now, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've gone from the basics of structuring an email to the nuances of communicating effectively with different audiences.
Yeah.
And even resolving conflicts.
It's a lot.
What stands out to you?
Yeah. What are some key takeaways?
From everything we've discussed.
Well, we've really gone deep on professional emailing for engineers.
We have.
From structuring our messages to navigating those tricky situations, like, wow, we've unpacked a lot.
Yeah.
So what are some key takeaways that have really stuck with you?
You know, what's resonated most with me is how much our emails really impact our professional image.
It's true.
It's like we could be brilliant engineers, but a poorly written email can just undermine all that hard work.
Right. It's like we've talked about so many subtle things that can make such a difference.
Right.
Like clear subject lines so people actually open our emails.
Yes.
Concise writing that respects everyone's time.
Absolutely.
Even just proofreading to avoid those like embarrassing typos.
Yeah. All those little things add up.
They do. They really do.
And what I found especially interesting was the advice on tailoring our language to the audience.
Right.
It's a skill, I think. A lot of engineers, myself included, need to work on.
It's true.
We can't always assume that everyone understands our jargon.
Yeah, the analogy of explaining Shakespeare to a dog.
Oh, yeah.
Really drove that home for me.
Oh, no, right?
It's about meeting people where they're at.
Yes.
Not overwhelming them with technical details that they might not need. Exactly. And even when there's disagreement, maintaining that professional tone is key.
Absolutely.
We're problem solvers by nature. So our emails should reflect that even when things get a bit heated.
Right.
And the sources that we've looked at, they really highlight that idea.
They do.
Finding common ground, focusing on solutions, and remembering that everyone's on the same team ultimately.
Right.
And what's also stayed with me is that our emails are kind of like digital breadcrumbs we leave behind.
Digital breadcrumbs.
Like that.
They paint this picture of our communication style, our professionalism, even our thought process.
It's like a portfolio, but for our writing skills.
Exactly.
And for engineers, that's super important.
It is. I mean, our technical abilities, they get us in the door, but clear, effective communication, that's what helps us move forward.
Absolutely. So
before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a thought to ponder.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on us.
Think about the last email you sent. Not just the content.
Okay.
But the way you structured it, the tone you used.
Yeah.
The impression it likely made on the recipient.
Right.
Did it represent you well? Did it advance your goals?
Those are good questions.
Because every email,
it's
a chance to refine those communication skills.
Right.
To become even more effective in our work.
It's not just about following a formula. It's about using email as a tool to build relationships, share knowledge, and ultimately become better engineers.
Exactly.
I love that.
So, on that note,
I
think we've successfully navigated this deep dive.
I think so too.
We've explored the depths of professional emailing for engineers.
We really have.
And I hope our listener is now equipped to write emails that are clear, concise, and impactful.
I think they are too. Thanks for joining me on this journey.
My pleasure.
Until next time, keep those emails sharp.
Yes.
And remember, even in the world of bits and bytes, words matter.
They do.